Welcome to another Lola Shorts interview. This is Rebecca Herman. I'm the artistic producer of Lola, and I'm so excited to have Nicole Taylor with us today. Nicole and I were first introduced to each other at grad school at UT some number of years ago that I won't mention. And Nicole, welcome. I'm so glad to have you on the program.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
So like I said, we met at UT. We were both grad students, and I remember that first semester that I was there, you were singing Queen of the Night, this iconic role. Talk to me about your, like, how you were in the role and like your experience at UT and what you got to do with Queen of the Night.
That was fun and kind of crazy. The Queen of the role, the Queen of the Night, is just a crazy role. It's insane. It's fast coloratura. It's high Fs, which is so ridiculous.
So crazy.
And, yeah, and she's just angry, and she's just, you know. Well, at least for the more famous aria, yes, or the most famous aria, I should say. And then the second aria, which is really the first aria, but it's less. It's not quite that.
It's not as known. It's not referenced as much.
And it's definitely a lot calmer. It has some serious coloratura in it though. And that kind of got me, because I'm not a coloratura. It's one of those things where different voices have like their own freak nature. I could sing Fs. That was the thing.
Right.
So I'm a soprano who's not a coloratura who could sing Fs. And also this was my first role ever as undergrad. So I'd actually sung it, you know, like many years, about 10 years before.
Wow. So coming back like 10 years later, that's a kind of interesting experience.
It was. It really, really was. I should say my debut in grad school was better than the debut in undergrad, because it was so funny. So my first night, the actual opening night of the show, I'm on the roll, and the platform, like, you go upstairs and the Queen of the Night is at the top of a huge platform. I'm really high. I couldn't even tell you how many feet. I'm very high out the air. Well, fortunately, the stairs up to the platform are behind part of the set, so people can't see you walking up. They just know that you're up there.
Yeah.
So I'm walking during the dun 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 dun. So what's going on is I'm walking dun 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 dun. Boop, 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 boop. I fall down the stairs.
Oh no!
I have to race up now to get there on time, just to go. Oh
my gosh. That's like the crazy part of live theater, right?
It is. That was my entrance into opera on stage. Can that be more dramatic than that? Can it?
No, but it, like, par for the course. I mean, opera is all about high drama all the time, I feel. So
yes, perfect role for that.
Yeah. So I think that you grew up in Houston. Did you come to Austin for grad school, or had you been in Austin already, or what was your path from Houston to Austin?
Yeah, I did. I came to Austin for grad school, but I actually waited a year and worked at Dell for a year selling computers, so that I can, like, you know, just get enough money to live.
Yeah.
Because there was about 10 years difference between when I graduated and when I started UT. So yeah, I needed a change. And because I had been accepted, I was like, well, I'm gonna just move up there and figure out what I'm gonna do. And
yeah.
And so that's what brought me to Austin and brought me to UT.
I had a similar story after my undergrad. I needed a break. I didn't take 10 years. I only took one, but I definitely had a year break and then moved to Austin to come for grad school as well. And I didn't know anyone or really the city at all, but really found a lot of really great connections with the other students and singers at UT, and it's been a lovely home ever since.
Cool.
So did you always want to be a singer? Like, when did you know, or like, when did you get like the vibe of like, oh, there's this really cool thing I can do with my voice?
I'd say 6 years old. I'm gonna be a singer. That's what I'm gonna do. I choose that. And then when I was about 14 years old, I decided it was gonna be an opera singer as opposed to just, Whitney Houston. I think she had it covered, so,
Right.
So I didn't need to do what she did. But yeah, opera singer, I decided 14. And but my parents swear I was born singing. They say that I was born, and there's this little song my dad used to sing. He said, "This is what you used to sing when you were a baby."
Oh,
I was like,
cute.
Sure it is.
So, being in Houston, were you exposed to opera early on in your life, or like at 14 you were introduced to opera and then you were like, oh, this is really cool? Or had you been exposed for a while?
I think my first exposure to opera was actually in the second grade. I was in a Vanguard program, which in Houston had a lot of magnet schools. And when I was growing up there, you could like apply and get into whichever program. Now it's done completely differently. But because my school was one of the gifted and talented schools, and they were offering this free performance by Houston Grand Opera for the kids to come in during the day and see Hansel and Gretel. And so I was so glad to be one of the people picked from my school to go see it. And I just loved it. I was already very into music, and I was playing piano by then. I was singing choirs, but that was the first time I actually heard opera.
Yeah, that's awesome.
The only addendum I have to that, as far as the first time, there's a very famous United Negro College Fund commercial with Leontine Price. So that was my other, to hear that kind of singing. And I remember her mouth being just so big, and the sound and everything.
Yeah.
So
well, and what an amazing, I think, what an amazing role model to have, or like someone to see, to be like, oh, I could look like me and like look like her and do this thing.
Exactly. That's the first time I heard of opera singing. Just seeing this woman going, it was like, wow, what's going on? That's amazing,
That is amazing.
Yeah, I think the context of opera for me was actually seeing an opera, seeing Hansel and Gretel, and then seeing the story. There was a thing that was also done back then. I don't know if it was everywhere, but in the school I went to, my music teacher, the program of what she taught was kind of connected to, I remember it being connected to several things. So she actually did a Hansel and Gretel week where we learned, I remember learning the prayer in that class and learning tunes and things like that. So by the time we went to see the show, we already knew about it. Kind of like
you were like ready.
Yeah, kind of how they do Peter and the Wolf, and they teach you the different themes. And so Hansel and Gretel was like that for me too. So I was ready to go see it, and then to hear it actually was like, oh.
Yeah, like chills. I mean, that music is so rich. Like I always think of it, or it has this like reputation as kind of, oh, it's just a children's opera. And then like you re-listen to it and the orchestration is so complex, and like it's just amazing music. And
exactly. I think it's a children's story, but the opera is fully grown up, it's just, you don't like half sing that.
Right. That's amazing. So you talked about Whitney Houston and Leontine Price. Did you have other role models, or were they like the two role models that you really looked towards as you were growing up, as like models of how you might be singing or just in life, not only singing?
I'd say those two are the primary way front runners. I listened to like just Black R&B urban music radio. It's a station in Houston called Magic 102. I listened to that like all my early life through my late high school.
Yeah.
And it's funny, on the weekends, not on the weekends, specifically on Friday. Well, yeah, on the weekends too. KTSU, which Texas Southern University, also there, they would play this thing called Listening Back. So they would play oldies. So it was kind of interesting because we heard the current song. So you hear the current Prince song throughout the week. And then on Friday and Saturday, I'd also hear all the Temptations and Four Tops and all of that.
Yeah.
So for me, all of that music is kind of in the same continuum, though it's clearly really different. You know, I could say, oh yeah, that's my dad's music, but I heard it all equally the same amount.
Totally.
So that was always interesting. But the person I could sing with most comfortably was Whitney Houston. Everybody else is too low.
Yeah. Well,
so me and Whitney, we had it.
That's amazing. Because so many people wish they could sing along with Whitney and like are topping out while she's going way higher.
The other person I could sing with was Prince. When he sang his high stuff, I was like, okay, we're where I am. So let's go.
Do you have, as you started to like get into opera more, did you find yourself like becoming attracted to particular operas or an aria? Do you have a like favorite aria or musical performance that you either saw live or like have seen recordings of?
So as I started learning about opera and everything, everything,
the world,
opera is everything, right? But yeah, that's when Leontine Price became very, very important to me. So I would get her, like I can't think of what it's called. It's something like the Leontine Price Greats, and it was a 4-disc CD. I listened to all of it every day. Maybe not all of it every day, but every day I would listen to it over and over and over again. And that was my thing. And then with that also, I love Domingo. I don't even know how I got into listening to Domingo, but I was like, of course I love Pavarotti, but I know everybody does too. My favorite about Domingo is because there was this meat in his tenor.
Yeah.
It wasn't this kind of a tenor. It was like this kind of a tenor. And I was like,
yeah,
that's cool. And so I would listen to the Three Tenors concert that I had on CD and watched all the time. Totally. And then I would get a series, just whenever I find any kind of CD, any kind of operatic aria compilation of people, and that's how I got familiar with different arias and different people who were singing and all that kind of thing. So that was it's kind of a self-introduction into that. But I would be remiss in not saying this. So I went to the High School of Performing and Visual Arts. And while I was there, there's very specific things you do in the vocal program leading up to your senior year. And senior year, at that time, I don't know if they still have it, there was this pink book that you had to complete on your own. And it took the whole year to do. One half of it was musical theater and history. It was your job to go to the library, find out the names, what was Tin Pan Alley. What was Tin Pan Alley? What was, vaudeville? Who are the originators of this type of role? And, so you learned all this history about musical theater, and you learned all the things that were going out. And I remember, like, by the time I graduated, one of the big musicals was Miss Saigon. That was like a big thing that was out at the time. And then the next semester, you did the same thing for opera. And it was like history of composers and different operas, but it was also specific history about who was singing. And that's how I got introduced to people other than Price. And that's probably how I got into Domingo. And learning about people like, of course, now I can't think of anybody's name, but well, learning the Rosa Poncel and Maria Callas
Yeah.
and people like that, you know, learning the earlier recorded history.
Yeah, like the big names when recordings were first coming out and stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Do
so
you
then,
have,
awesome.
I'm remembering now that one of the things you did when you were at UT is that you curated some pretty amazing concerts around Black History Month and all of that. Were you aware in high school? I'm sure that you were. This is a very inane question. But were you aware in high school that perhaps the representation of like African American composers, singers, like the history was incomplete? Or was that something that you kind of started feeling later on?
I honestly started feeling it later on. I didn't really know about African American composers. Because I grew up in the church, and I grew up with very educated musicians in the church. So I was very well aware of spirituals and some of the key people who are known for arranging spirituals. So I knew about Paul Johnson and Edward Boatner and William Dawson. I knew who those people were in general.
Yeah.
But as far as an art song by a Black composer, I didn't know anything about that. I knew Porgy and Bess, which is not the same, because that's by Mr. Gershwin.
Right.
And I did know about Treemonisha because Houston Grand Opera at one point did a huge production that I didn't see. I think it was actually when I was more like middle school and younger. They did a huge production of Treemonisha. They actually recorded it. I think they got an award for it. So it was mentioned a lot. This is Scott Joplin did this opera Treemonisha. It's by a Black composer with Black cast. I was like, that's really cool, but I never heard it until much later.
Yeah.
So what happened was, by the time I was at UT, I was working on my doctorate, and I was in a class where it's, you know, one of those classes that teaches you how to use the library. So you're supposed to create your annotated bibliography.
Yeah.
And that's when I chose this idea of Black composers. And that's when I started researching, and that became my dissertation subject. I was first introduced to Black composers actually in undergrad by my teacher, Debria Brown, who's a Black opera diva extraordinaire. I mean, she
had the air,
and she was, you know.
Yeah.
And everything. And she's like born and raised in New Orleans. So it's like if you called her voicemail, and if you called her and got the voicemail, it'd be, Je suis désolée. You know, she's so fantastic. And she taught me about this famous book, which I don't have around me, it's in my car, but it's called The Anthology of African American Composers by Willis Patterson, who is still living. He's a composer, and he put that compilation together. And for many, many, many years, that was the one place you can go to find that information altogether. So having that for like all the time, and like trying to learn the songs in there, that's also what sparked the idea of, hey, this got to be more than just this book, you know?
Like there's more than just this one book.
Exactly.
And all of the people in that book probably wrote more than the couple, like the one or two art songs that were in that book.
Exactly. I was like, you know, yeah, they probably spent their life writing more than just the song that's listed. Just the one, you know?
Right.
It was a great foray into how vastly different all of it was, because you're talking about 20th century music for the most part. So
yeah.
20th century is, to me, the way I look at it, it's like where music blew up in a good way. Like in classical music, really went from, okay, this is what we used to do, and keeping it very like, this is how we used to do it, to what's possible, to the furthest extremes and everything in between that, until kind of finally settling more in somewhere in the middle, I think, by the time.
Like maybe we still like a little bit of tonality.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, but it's interesting because for that whole, 100-year time period, the music for African American composers is just as varied and just as imaginative and pretty fantastic and just as, you know, spectacular as everything else that was out. And Harold is great, and some of
Yeah.
it was too. It's just that we've forgotten that and it didn't stay known. It's like that information just didn't stay in the mix of things.
Yeah. Well, and in I think a lot of art history and focus, at least in America and perhaps the Western world, like this focus on white and male has been so prioritized, and we're still trying to undo all of the sort of damage that systemically we have done to all of the artists who didn't meet that demographic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I feel that in classical music, there's also this thing we did with tradition. Because so it's not just that it's white and male, but it's specifically Europe and
Yeah.
specifically German, French, and Italian. And I would say, depending on what it is, it might be just German or might be just French. And so that's really a narrow focus. We don't even pay attention to our own American composers of the time nearly as much.
You're so right.
Less women and anybody else who were composing. So we've really got that knothole small.
Yeah. I was talking with a friend of mine, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, and all of a sudden this term that I've used for my entire career and when I was younger, which is legit music theater. And I was like, oh, we need to reassess that term.
What? I never thought of that. That's so true.
Right? Like, just there's so many like gates and fences that we have put up in the education system of music that I'm like, oh, let's rewind the tape. Or not rewind the tape. We can't rewind the tape, but clear away and start refocusing a little bit.
Exactly. It's a lot about who's worthy and who can be included and who needs to be focused on. It's a lot of gates. I mean,
Yeah.
Part of the whole thing about like my fascination of seeing other African Americans in specifically in opera, but in any form of classical music is and it was presented to me I often considered classical music to be like, you need the most skill and the most training to do that. I don't feel quite like that anymore. I do respect it because I do feel like there's not like for the worst opera singer out there, it's really relative because there's no bad opera singer making it. It's just not possible right now.
Right.
But there could be some crappy other stuff out there because then it's a little bit more about behind the scenes stuff. That said, there can be a rapper who's so proficient and is equal to Mozart, and that is also music and also legit and
Correct.
also
Correct.
all of that. And at first, because it was considered the highest form, then to see Black people also do that and excel, that was huge. That still is huge. It does
Absolutely.
say, okay, so this barrier was set. Here we are, Leontine Price. Here we are, Grace Bumbry, and
yes,
just Jesse Norman, yes, just blowing the roof off of stuff. So that's honestly when I was 14 and decided it's going to be classical music. It's because you can't fake it, and it's because I know I have to work really hard, and because I know if I was considered good at it, it's because I did all the work.
Yeah.
And I made that. Nobody falsely crowned me.
Right. Like no one was going to kind of give you a handout. Like you had to prove there's no fake in this voice. It's mine.
Exactly. And plus, you're talking about singing over orchestras and no implication and Amplification. I'm making up words today. I don't even know what's going on.
That's good.
Amplification. But none of that stuff. And granted, all of that is used today in modern opera for various reasons, for recording purposes, and because also you don't have to scream over an orchestra, and it gives other people opportunities to sing different things. There's all kinds of reasons, whether people agree with it or not. But at one time, I mean, and at some point in everybody's career, when you're not able to sing with a company that has all of that stuff, then it's you being able to make it over all of that, being able to be heard at the back of the wall. So you still got to prove you're legit at that point.
Right. Legit. That's so good. So when you are curating a recital or a concert, whatever, do you have certain guidelines, or like how do you go about deciding what you want to put on it? Because I feel like so much of what I know you as is this like curator of concerts and great performances, whether it's yourself or of a whole community of people.
Sure. So when I was doing the Black composer concerts at UT, it started off, and it's every year was like kind of chaos until it all got focused. But what I would concentrate on is the build out of the concert. I knew I needed to be able to break up like a focus. So I couldn't have singer after singer after singer, definitely not soprano after soprano after soprano. So I made it a big point to include jazz, because I do feel, especially the way I used to think about it, like as far as legit, I felt classical was just as legit as jazz because of the complexities and all that stuff, mathematical
The
stuff
harmony,
talk about, harmonies, it's jazz and classical right there. And I love putting them together. And because it was a focus on Black composers, let's also look at some music that Black composers originated,
Absolutely.
So when I built the concert, it was always like, okay, we're going to start off a certain way. And then we had, especially with the alliance is not a good word, with the partnership we had with Houston Tillotson and Dr. Gloria Quinlan, which, we worked really well together and we're still friends. And that was a really great thing that happened to get both schools to come together like that. So it's now a tradition that it starts off with, there's a particular version of the Star Spangled Banner that is written by a Black composer that they do. And then that's followed up by Roland Carter's Lift Every Voice and Sing. It's his version, which is my favorite ever. And we do it every year, including the year that Roland Carter was our guest.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, that was awesome. And I like that now. We tried to do this a little bit when I was there, but now that's a combined UTHT choir of people who do that. So that's also really, really cool. And so that's where I start off with. No, those things are at the beginning. I'm breaking up and introducing jazz. So there's BUT jazz, there'd be HT jazz, and the choir mixed in with a few singers from UT, a few singers from HT, and that would be the concert. So it's just a strategic placing of all that. Remembering we didn't have a crew, so right. You can't strike. There's no curtain, So you have to think about all of that. How can I get all this done and get people on and off stage without sitting? And sometimes it wasn't perfect, but the concert was great.
Yeah.
And everybody loved it. And it's still going. Well, I don't think it happened this year, but up through before, COVID is still going strong. Yeah. So I love that. When I do my own concerts and my own recitals, I think thematically, like, what do I want to say? One of my favorite concerts I did with a good friend of mine, Nikki Birdsong, and who's the pianist on the concert you will see
Yeah.
shortly. We called it Woman, I can't remember, Woman, Star, Sand, and Spirit. And what it was is it was all about, basically it's this woman's story. And the first group of songs I did were all, they had woman in the title or girl or something like that. And then stars, what was it? No, it wasn't stars. It was woman. Sand was, Nikki had written several pieces, several short piano pieces, and it was about her playing as a child, like in the sandbox and just doing kid things and enjoying it. Spirit was like where we used our spirituals, and specifically I did the John Carter cantata, which I'm doing a couple pieces of that on this concert.
Yeah.
And just a little quick segue, John Carter cantata, what it is he's an African-American composer. He wrote this cantata that is not really a cantata, but kind of is a cantata. And all the pieces have cantata-like names. So it's called Rondo and Aria and Recitative and Toccata. But they're actually spirituals. The Rondo, I believe, is Peter ring them bells. The aria, no, the recitative is Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child. The aria is Let Us Break Bread Together, and the toccata is Right on King Jesus. And this is like some serious piano music. And these spirituals, they're familiar, but they're not easy.
Right.
Especially that Right on King Jesus. Yeah, for the pianist and the singer, but it's so much fun, and it's such an interesting tonality to them, and he really changes them and makes them something else. And it's just interesting that he puts it together in this cantata format. So it's like, what does it mean that the recit to Let Us Break Bread Together is Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child? What does that mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought that was fascinating. So that was the spirit part of of that particular concert. This one is just, it's about Black composers. It's all, everybody's Black composer on this one, but it is, I feel like I am threading a narrative through. Without giving a whole concert, because then you'll make me think too hard. But like the very first song is Song to a Dark Virgin by Florence Price. And the poetry of Langston Hughes in that, I just find it so fascinating. That poem by itself is just like, what were you thinking? What was in there? What does that mean? And it's so open to whatever you get out of it, because it's just so interesting. And all the way through, it kind of rises and then falls, I mean, through the concert. So the last piece that I'm going to do is called Homesick Blues. That's also a poem by Langston Hughes. And it's also, it's interesting too, because it's not what you think it is by the title. And you find out what he's homesick about is he's sick of being home, not he's sick for home.
Interesting.
Yeah. So,
And how appropriate for after a year of all of us being stuck in our homes.
Exactly. Yeah, it's about like jumping on a railroad car and just taking off. Just going.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I am so looking forward to hearing some of this recital and diving into learning more about all of these composers and
yes,
seeing what LOLA can program in the coming years and stuff, and talking with you about that. As we wrap up, I'm just wondering, aside from music and aside from these recitals, what is inspiring you these days? People, a quote, anything at all?
Kind of in a way, everything around me, and then I dream. Like I dream dreams, and sometimes I literally wake up with like, I gotta write that down, and it's this
Yeah.
like massive story and idea that I would love to figure out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Also, just kind of the closer I am to what I really want, the more creative I tend to be. I
That,
find I'm more creative help doing living out my passion than I am with doing somebody else's. And I can help people find theirs, but that's different from trying to get passionate about somebody else's thing that I'm not really passionate about.
yeah. Oh, that's a sidebar, but I recently reconnected with my high school choral conductor, and he was a mentor, and he was my younger sister's piano teacher. He was just very important to like everyone in our family.
Oh, cool.
And he is doing some new stuff in his life, and he recently is starting to do some consulting, and he invited us to join his like first talk, and he asked his first speaker, who was a reverend, and I'm blanking on his name right now, when you hear the words, "I have a dream," what does that mean to you? And of course, I went to Martin Luther King Jr., and it was during February, and both of these men are Black men and in the church. But the response was really like you were talking about, like having these personal dreams and like having a purpose, or like finding your purpose and your drive, and like letting that speak to you and kind of like fulfill your life. It was really fascinating, and it reminded me of that, what you were saying.
Oh, cool.
And finally, is there anything you're looking forward to in the coming months, in the new year, that you can share with us?
I don't have anything planned, but I kind of do that. So what I mean by that is that I don't plan necessarily the year, but once I get an idea, then I plan it out a lot.
Yeah.
What I'm looking forward to is, so doing this concert that's coming up, it came about as really from work. I'm doing it at work. We're working
and remind the listeners who might not know, where do you work?
Oh, I work for a company called Qualia. It's an Austin startup. Actually, it's a San Francisco startup that has a base also here in Austin. And yeah, what we create is title software. So you might have used Qualia if you're a buyer, seller, realtor, lender. You might have used the software in the purchase or sale of property. Or if you're a title agent, then you're our main customer using that software. And because we are in tech and we're based out of San Francisco, and there's also a lot of things in that. We're also majority white male, very few minorities, very few women, very few women minorities. And so what happened was, when the George Floyd incident happened and my company wanted to make a change, there are several initiatives that started. And one of the things I wanted to do is kind of present who I am. A lot of people at my company do know that I'm an opera singer and I have a degree in that, and that's really my passion. So it became like, hey, why don't I do a concert? Which is good for me. I've missed singing for a while, and I really, really wanted to do that. And I thought I could do an hour-long concert that takes place during the lunchtime. I can then talk about, what I'm singing about, and it will focus on Black composers. So it's me as a Black woman presenting Black composers in this classical world. and the significance of all of that and how that benefits everybody from knowing something about that. It's even that it exists,
Yes. Yes.
that's a huge thing, And so that's where the idea of the concert came from. It's just me kind of wanting to be me in this other space that I'm in, and to present myself fully. I
Yeah.
can be all Black, all woman, all classical opera singer at the same time.
That's amazing. I love that story, and I am so excited to hear some of these pieces and just continue to talk with you over the year. And I'm so glad we were able to reconnect, Nicole. This has been so much fun.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much. Thank you for reaching out.
Yeah, my pleasure. Well, everyone, I hope that you will enjoy Nicole's musical selections and give her some love. If they want to follow you, is there some place that they should go to, Nicole? Either a Facebook or no?
I do have a Facebook music channel, but I don't really do much with it. But I am on YouTube, and you can see these clips on YouTube. So it's Nicole L. Taylor. I think it's Nicole.L.Taylor.
Perfect. Great.
Might be Nicole.L.Taylor Soprano.
Great. We will make sure that we have that link down in the comments of our interview. So thank you so much for tuning in. And this is Rebecca Herman signing off. Goodbye, everyone.